All right, we're in John's Gospel. Go ahead and put up our life signs shot there, Ted. Okay, choosing life over dullness. Life signs from the Gospel of John. We're in John's Gospel for the next couple of months. We're looking at 7 signs because there are 7 signs. John selects 7. And remember what he says in John 20, 30 and 31. Let's go there to that text. Because I think it'll remind us again what we're about. Jesus performed many other signs. So we don't have them all written down. We just have the ones that John selects to put in his gospel in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. So in the first half of the book, really, are the signs, the book of signs. And we're going to see about 7 of those signs. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing, through your faith, through putting your trust in Jesus, you get to have life. That is life eternal, but it is life now. It is quality life, a quality existence that comes from God. So that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. It's a great ambition, right? As we look at why John wrote, and as we get to share in it and think about our own relationship to Jesus, the Messiah, the one that, remember, Thomas last week takes the whole book to get there, but by chapter 20, Thomas says, "My Lord and my God," and makes that confession. And I would pray that that'll happen with each one of us, that we'll see again who he is. And when we do that, that doesn't simply mean that we just make a simple confession. That's part of it, but part of it is trusting our life and all the circumstances of our life to this Jesus, who is the Messiah, who gives life. Do we believe it? So here we are in the very first sign this morning. And John tells us in his book that this is the first sign. Do you remember the reading? If you saw that in the reading there in verse 10 or 11 of chapter 2, right at the end of the section, John says this is the first sign. So he gives us a heads up. Then he's going to tell us the second sign. We're going to look at that next week. And then after that, he says, you're kind of on your own. He doesn't really tell us after that. But he says the first one and he says the second one. But we'll find all 7 over the next few weeks. Now, I got a question for you. What's your most embarrassing moment? Have you had one or 2 or many? It seems like I've had a whole lifetime of them. I remember one, particularly one. I was preaching. I was a guest speaker at a little church. And there was somebody down there in the first row, and 5 minutes into my talk, they said, "Are you done yet?" Loud enough for the entire congregation to hear. And I'm like, "No, and I'll let you know when I am." So that was a little humbling, a little embarrassing. I remembered the one from when I was a kid, and I was playing in Little League Baseball. And I don't know, this one isn't really related so much to life drama or to this story, but it was embarrassing a bit, so I will tell the story. I was probably about 11 years old and thought I was a pretty good baseball player. And we just finished practice, and we were in this several sports fields together. And my mom picked me up in the station wagon, and I was on the passenger side, and we were heading out. Still had my glove in my hand. And as we were leaving practice, and we were leaving the field, and as we did that, we passed another field. The lights were on. There were adults that were playing adult softball league. And I remember as my mom was driving by, somebody smacked one down the left field line, and it was coming right at our car. And so I told her, I said, stop the car. I had my glove, I got out of the car, I tried to catch the ball. Okay, and as I'm doing that, I'm looking up, there are the lights, the batter's running, the crowd, the people are looking at everybody, and I missed the ball, it bounces up against our car. I just almost collide with the left fielder who had gone over his head. I pick up the ball and we drive off. And what I realized is that the driveway angled, and we were in fair territory the entire time this happened. So I just stole the ball from their field. Oh, brother, do you have some embarrassing moments? This was one in the Gospels that was embarrassing because it was embarrassing to run out of wine. A wedding feast was about 7 days, 6 or 7 days. That's a lot of time and with a lot of guests. With the whole village of Cana, everybody was there. It was probably mainly family of families. But we know that it wasn't just folks from Cana only, because Mary is there, and she's not from that town, and we know Jesus and his disciples are there. So it was more than a social inconvenience. It was a bit of a disgrace. It was shameful to run out of wine. Okay, and so this is the embarrassing moment for the bridegroom and the groom's family and the groom's family and the father of the groom, and so that's our social setting. Just interesting. Now, a couple of things. If you ask almost anybody in the street about this particular sign or miracle, they would know about this one, wouldn't they? It's probably like the most everybody knows about turning water into wine. I was thinking about why that is. Why would that be? I want to give you just a couple of hints on why I think that is, and then I want to make a couple observations from our text. The first one is, I think that everybody knows about this particular sign, where they might not know about something else, because family. It involves family. And it's one of the few texts, actually, where you see Jesus just loving on family. There are other texts where you have this celibate, single, itinerant rabbi walking around, and he's saying brother against brother, father against mother, and he's calling people to discipleship, and particularly this is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You see, in his call to discipleship really upends people's sense of family. And it's very, very challenging as you read those passages. Sometimes he becomes a divide between families who follow him and families who don't. And remember the passage we had a few weeks ago we looked at, who are my mother and my brothers and my sister and my mother? He says in Mark chapter 3. Well, here I think we have sort of a warm and fun, family-friendly event. And Jesus is all about it. And so I think for that reason alone, it sort of appeals to our emotional side. The second thing about it is, not only was there the family, we had a family slide, and maybe you had it up there, Ted, and I missed it, but the second one is fun. Not only was there family times, but there were fun times. And there's the family times. Move to the next one there, please. And if I could just describe it that way, a wedding is a lot of fun. And here is Jesus. I wonder why Jesus was invited to the wedding. Well, maybe he was fun to be with. How about that for a novel idea? I think he might have enjoyed being there. And so we see, I remember Rick Ashley told the story that someone discovered, he said, oh, you're a preacher? Well, you seem like you have way too much fun to be a preacher. You know, how somehow religion sort of gets this perception that we've got to be somber and that we have to, we understand there's Jesus hanging on the cross, and I get it. And there he is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22. And there's Isaiah 53 and the man of sorrows. And that covers Scripture, and I get that. And yet there's this other side that I want us to see in this first sign, where Jesus is a lot of fun, and he's enjoying the party. He's enjoying the festivities at the wedding feast. So we shouldn't forget that. And it reminds me of a little book, a fun little book that I've been reading by Carlos Whitaker called The Moment Maker. And go ahead and put up the 3 things that are related to the Moment Maker. There is what we call Chronos life and Kairos life in John's Gospel. Chronos life is like, well, there's yesterday, and there's today, and there's tomorrow, and there's 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock and 11. Chronos, chronology, we get it right. Well, in the Greek, there's also Kairos. That is life. That is a moment that is punctuated with power and meaning in the moment. I want to be a moment maker person, not just, one day, the next day, the next day. Okay, and Carlos Whitaker in this book points out how Jesus is such a wonderful moment maker. He creates moments. He creates moments. He would, if he had an 11-year-old, they would never forget their birthday party because he'd be a moment creator. And he receives moments. Sometimes you just receive God's grace and you get God's grace, and so you're attentive and you're open and you're attuned to, wow, what a morning. And the trees, wow, and you know what I'm saying, receive moments of grace. And then at times we rescue moments. You see somebody that is walking down with a gas can and you say, I'm going to stop and help this person get to the gas station. Or whatever the rescue moment is, we find ourselves in life rescuing moments to turn them into moments of grace. Jesus did this. Creative moments, received moments, and rescued moments. And I know not every day is all that way, and it's not that, there is a lot of routine to our life, and I get that. I'm not saying down with routine, but I am simply saying let's have these kairos moments, not just the chronology moments, and we see them in Jesus, and he does it in this sign. If he were here in the flesh today, I think he would be at the wedding party. Okay, I want you to see three things in the text here this morning. The first one is this. I want you to see that there is creative power that comes from Jesus. Creation, in fact, answers to Jesus. Because guess what? If we take our text and we take it seriously, we take the wine, we run out of wine, it's hard to grow grapes. It takes a long time, naturally. Okay? And it takes a long time to take grapes and turn them into wine. Well, according to our text, Jesus does this. Time is not a factor. We say, well, how could any human? Well, that's just the point. John is trying to say he is human, and we're going to see his humanity, and we see his humanity all over the Gospels, but he is fully man, and he is fully God. And both the aspects of who he is are brought together throughout the Gospels. You can't even separate them. So you see this creative element. I want you to see this verse. And Betty said in her class last week, they only got through the first 5 verses. So I guess you touched on this one, Betty. And here's this. Listen to this. It's talking about the Word. Through him, all things were made. That's creative power. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. We're saying, well, we understand this in relation to God. And our text is trying to say, see it also in relation to this one Jesus who comes in the flesh, fully man and fully God. Creative power, creation answers to Jesus. And out of that, he gets lots of wine. I mean, there were 6 stone water jars. Each one held 15 to 20 gallons. That is a lot of water. That's a lot of water, let alone a lot of wine. And we find out in our text, it's good wine. So we see his creative power. The second thing I see in the text is he is this compassionate giver. Compassion flows from Jesus. I mean, there are bigger fish to fry, I suppose, than running out of wine. I mean, how about peace in the Middle East? It was a problem then, it's a problem now, it's a big problem. Okay, I get it. But this wedding was a big deal, and Jesus cared about the people that were there, and knowing that the host must supply all the guests, and so he averts the social disaster, and that was important to Jesus. I think it's an interesting and reflective question. Why was this the first sign? And why would he do something like this? And also, as you read through the text, very few people even knew he did it. It was very much behind the scene. Go back and read it again. Read it in our text. Not everybody was even aware that he did this. Just a few of the folks even understood. And in fact, the disciples did, and they put their faith in him. So we have these things working together here. The unbelievables, that is water into wine, working with undeniables, the character and the personality and the truth of Jesus. And Jim Woodruff put this framework together, those 2 words that have helped me through my Christian life in looking at John's gospel, undeniables and unbelievables, but the 2 things are inextricable. They're so wed together all through the gospels that what is supposed to happen is it produces faith. It produces trust in this one that he really is who he says he is. Okay. And finally, in our, I wanted to point out that Mary, now think about her for just a minute. She's the one that goes to Jesus, and Jesus first says to her, dear woman, and I don't think we should look at that in a condescending way. Okay, most scholars would say that was in fact, it's used several times throughout the Gospels to say dear woman. It was respectful, but he says to her, my time has not yet come, And then think about Mary. Think about Mary. She knows the situation. We've got a problem. She knows her son will do the right thing. And she takes action and she says to the servants, listen to him. You want a lesson right there. Right there's a lesson. Just do what Mary did. Do what Mary did. Understand the situation. Know where you're putting your trust and go to him and know he's going to take care of it. And so it's my challenge to you this morning. Cast all your anxiety on him. For what? He will care for you. I want you to hear that from our text again this morning. How many times has he spared us as he's rescued moments in our lives? And then finally, a celebratory spirit is what I see. I see celebration. It's valued by Jesus. I want our worship times to be celebration. Our times in the Lord's Supper is a time of celebration. The women's prayer breakfast, time of celebration. That we see celebrate when Jesus is present, there is celebration that happens. Do you believe that life from Jesus is exhilarating? Satan wants us to believe that life is drudgery. And even that life with Jesus is drudgery. And there's a lot of people, religious people, that model that. I don't think that fits our text. He speaks more about happiness than he does about heaven. In fact, in John 2, then in verse 10, he says it this way, but you have saved the best till now. The best wine came out after Jesus did his miraculous sign. And could there be a message there for us that we're to find the best of life? I'm reading a book right now by Richard Rohr's Catholic priest, who talks about the second half of life, and it's called Falling Upward. And he talks about how his life, really in the second half of life, began to open up to understand the spiritual dimensions in ways that he didn't in the first half of his life. It's really kind of an interesting idea that he said, really, about 50, that's when you just get cranking on this stuff. But what I want us to see this morning as it pertains then to Jesus is while Satan gives the best first and saves the worst for last. I can give you 100 examples. He shows you the alcohol, he doesn't show you the gutter. He shows you the big house, he doesn't show you the mortgage. He shows you gratification in telling someone off, and he doesn't tell you about the broken relationship that you have to repair. He shows you the pornography and not the addiction. Jesus does the opposite. And in fact, what we see in Scripture again and again is that more we taste the grace of God, the better it gets. He saves the best for last. So what's this whole passage about? It's about this, transformation. It's about change. It's about turning ordinary dullness into abundant life, and I think you can do it if you tune in to a relationship with Jesus. Ultimately, we're going to be invited to a wedding feast. It's called the wedding banquet, Revelation says. And I believe at that banquet, the wine is going to be superb, spectacular. So what do we do today as we move forward into that direction, as we invite him to help in every area of our life? Where are you embarrassed today? Where do you feel the shame? Where do you feel the disaster? Where do you feel the dullness? And Jesus is going to come along, and let's put our slide up there again, the compassion, the creative power, the compassionate giver, and the celebratory spirit. They come from Jesus. Here's my challenge to you this morning. We're going to pray. We've got just a few minutes to pray in each section. I want you to turn around in your group. We've got a shepherd over here, Lewis and Joyce and Steve over here in this section, and Don right here, and who we got over here? Okay, right back here, Glenn and Steve, right over here. Steve, you got a small crew right here. Take care of them, pastor them the next 4 or 5 minutes. If you have a need, if you have an area of embarrassment, of shame, if you have an area of your life where you need water to be turned into wine, let's turn to Jesus. I want your life to be the next sign. Let's pray together.